Can you see where the probe's coming? Usually I like to take a wire cleaner. Everybody see that little hole that's going through? It's right there. That's your hypoglossal canal. Okay? That's where your 12th cranial nerve comes out of, or goes through. Hypoglossal, actually, hypo means below, glossal is referring to your tongue. So it's involved in innervating your tongue. You can move it around, you eat food. It's a good thing. We need that tongue to talk. Just to talk proficiently. So we got hypoglossal canal. I showed you the superior and inferior temporal line on the actual skull part. If you want to see that, I'll show you that in a minute, okay? I can't show you on the model. I guess I could. It's in this area. You can't really see it. Superior is on top, inferior is in below. If I ever give you this in real life, it'll be on a quiz, it will be like a real skull, okay? It's much more clear. The temporal bone, we know this is our temporal bone. There's a bunch of parts to it. We've got a temporal bone up here that's been pulled out of the skull, so I can actually, like, without having to like flip the skull all around 15 different ways, I can show you the parts on the disarticulated bone. So it's always important to remember when we're thinking about the skull, for one thing, and we talk about the os coxa. The os coxa is 3 bones that have fused together, right? Just like your sacrum is 5 vertebrae that have fused together. Your skull is a shitload of bones that have fused together, all right? All these guys, frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal, they've all fused together among others. Okay, just remember that when you're looking at these things. So, I want you to look. This is our temporal bone, right? This is like, I just pulled it out of the skull. Okay, you see that? This is the right one, technically. So, if we look at our temporal bone, you got this flat part. When we talked about cells, what was the word we used to describe the flat ones?
Squamous.
Squamous means squash. So this flat part of the temporal bone is called the squamous part. Okay? See this bumpy part? Kind of looks like a little mountain range in there. That's the petrous part. Petrous means rocky. So your squamous part and your petrous part. Okay? So if we look back on the outside, this is your zygomatic process. This big bump right here, it's called your mastoid process. Okay, one of your mastication is chewing. Your mastoid muscle hooks up to there, or your masseter muscle is what it is, not your mastoid muscle. Your masseter muscle. When I see mastoid process, it's big. I think of a mastodon because they were big. Okay, they're gone now, but your mastoid process is still there. That's a good thing. I like to eat, so chewing's kind of important. Mastoid process, we see this little pointy thing, this little sharp dagger like down here. That's your styloid process. Remember when people had PDAs? Some people still do. They have the little stylus. That's what I think it looks like. Okay, looks like a little stylus. So you got mastoid process, the pointy styloid process. If we look in between those two, there's this little hole. What's the word for hole? I just called you the big hole. Foramen's a word for hole. So that's the stylomastoid foramen. It's just those two things put together to describe that hole, because it's right between them. Okay? So I'm going to switch back to the real skull. I'm going to take this off. What I'm taking off, if I can get it off, I'm not going to take it off. I'm not going to take it off. But we see where our mandible joins up right here. It's got little rubber things on it, but that's a little indention in the bone right there. That's the mastoid fossa, or the mandible fossa. Mandibular fossa. Okay, that's where the condylar process of your mandible actually sits in. Okay, and then you chew or talk or whatever you do. Mandibular fossa. So then we're going to go to 2 holes. The one that's posterior when you're looking at it from an inferior or bottom view. Furthest one to the back is your jugular foramen. It looks like a little kidney bean hole. Okay, jugular foramen. Everybody see that? You got one on each side. Looks like a little kidney bean, I think. Somebody like hurled a kidney bean really fast, and it made a hole. A really stout kidney bean. It was really old, really hard. So right in front of that, we have the carotid canal. Jugular foramen, your jugular vein on each side of your head runs up through there. Your carotid canal is where your carotid artery runs through. We get to learn the arteries later in the semester. Fun, fun. Anybody ever seen The Lion King? When Simba is fighting Nala for the first time, Timon is screaming, "Go for the jugular," and that's why I always think about when I look at the jugular foramen. He's screaming, "Go for the jugular." That runs in my head. I see little Timon. Go for the jugular. Okay. So, jugular foramen, carotid canal. Let's move to the sphenoid bone. Sphenoid. This whole thing right here looks like a little, it looks like Batman. You pull it out of the skull, this is what it looks like from a superior view. From a superior view, that's what it looks like. Okay? Everybody see that? You see the outline in the actual skull? Cool deal. It's got a bunch of parts. I'm going to pull it out and look at the individual parts, at least the first two. The greater wing is everything down here. It's the big wing. If you look at it in the skull, it's all this. The lesser wing is the little stingray on top. Everybody see the little stingray? That's what it looks like. That's what gets Steve Irwin ripped. We love you, Steve. Stay out of the ocean. It's a dangerous place. Sella turcica. This little indention right there, I just put my finger in. That's your sella turcica. Sella turcica means Turk's saddle. Was that on your list last week? I feel like we talked about it before. No, we talked about the axis looks like a little saddle. Sella turcica. Okay, that's what it means. If somebody looked at that and was like, "Oh, it kind of looks like a Turkish saddle." I've never seen a Turkish saddle, so I wouldn't have any clue what it looks like. That's where your pituitary gland sits. You think your pituitary is kind of important? That's a lot of bone to be sitting around one little gland. So yeah, it's very important. Our pterygoid process. You can really only see the pterygoid process when you pull it out, or the best way to see it is when you pull it out. You got two of them. There's a lateral and a medial part, but this whole thing is pterygoid process. The lateral and medial is not on your list. Don't worry about it. Okay, pterygoid process. Okay. Now we get to do the foramen. Everybody loves the foramen. In actuality, nobody likes the foramen. I'm gonna move to try to get like in the middle of your group, so that you can like see me when I do it. I'm probably gonna squat down and try to like share my. All right. This first hole, we're gonna go outside to inside, right? Lateral to medial. This first hole right here, the little bitty one, the small one, is the foramen spinosum. Bracket those off in your list. So put a bracket around all four of them, and write SOLR, which is the order they're in. Spinosum, I think of it as solar, minus the A, right? Spinosum, foramen spinosum, which we just looked at. Ovale, lacerum. I see that? And then we have rotundum up here. Rotundum. If we follow the rotundum, it comes out where? You see it right there? See where my little probe's sticking out? See it? Okay. So solar, that's how I remember it. Spinosum, ovale, lacerum, rotundum. Above the rotundum, this right here, if we follow my probe and look at it, where's that at?
The eye.
That is in the eye. There's a little hole in the eyeball that I'm putting my probe through. That is the optic canal. Okay? It's where your optic nerves come from your eyeball into your brain at. looks like a little cord, like your mouse cord can stick through there. And your optic nerves, they plug into your brain like a little USB. Okay, so just plugging in there, giving you some visual input. Superior orbital fissure. We look at the front of this skull. You see the little eyebrows in the eyes? In the back right there? See that? See the little eyebrows? Little angry eyebrows?
No, I can't.
Sorry. Little angry eyebrows?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Everybody see the angry eyebrows? There's one on each side. It's right next to the optic canal. Those are your superior orbital fissures. Okay? Now we get to do the ethmoid bone. I'm going to give you a bunch of views of this. I'm going to grab it just so you can see what you can see. You can come over here if you want. I just want to make sure everybody can see why it's on this. Alright. And if you don't get it today, like somebody will be here in open lab. I'll probably be here for a little bit anyways. Nick and Mike can show you.
Okay.
Alright? If you can't make open lab, like email me and we'll set up a time. We can get together maybe this weekend sometime. Okay? I'm cool with it. Alright. Alright. So if we look superior view, the top of the ethmoid bone is this. I don't know what that looks like, to be honest with you. I was trying to think of like what it reminds me of. Kind of reminds me of like the outline of a land speeder from Star Wars. But that's where my brain goes. Okay, because I'm a nerd and I'm okay with it. So this whole thing is ethmoid bone. It's the all up in your nose bone. If I were to pull it out of your skull, this is what it looks like. Okay? It's actually a part of it that's not on here. The perpendicular plate is not on this bone itself. So I'm going to start from this view and name stuff we can see, and then we'll look at it from the front, and we'll talk about the perpendicular plate, and then we'll talk about the sides that we can see, the orbital plates. So from the top, this little shark fin right here on our land speeder, it's called the Krista Galley. Okay, she's a sweetheart. Krista Galley, little shark fin. My TA, when I took this class a long time ago, his name was Krista. And so when I looked at the Krista Galley, I thought of my TA. She was a nice person. I replaced her when she left, so I got her job. She's a sweetheart. She's in dental school now. All right, perpendicular plate. I have to turn around and look at the front to see the perpendicular plate, right? Remember when we talked about the vomer? Was the bottom part of this little nose thing right there? The perpendicular plate is the top. There's like a skull that splits in half. You can see the perpendicular plate in the vomer real well. I think it's on your flashcard. Has everybody seen that before? Okay. That's part of the ethmoid bone. Your orbital plates. There's two ways to look at it. From the front, everybody find the you have your nasal bone, you have your lacrimal bone, right? The little one where your tear ducts go through. Behind the lacrimal bone, you have a little rectangle. See the little rectangle in there? It's on both sides, a little rectangle. That's your orbital plate, part of your ethmoid bone. If I pull it out and look at it, and I'll never give you this on a quiz. I'm not going to like throw a bone out there. But just to think about it, if I pull it out and looking at it from a superior view and I turn it, it's the sides of this guy is your orbital plate. A little rectangle right there. Everybody see that? Okay. Orbital plate. Plates, there's more than one, right? There's one on each side. Cribriform plates. This whole thing is two cribriform plates put together. Okay? The holes in this plate, each of these plates, I guess you would say. Krista Galley kind of like comes up in the middle of them. The holes in them, what's our word for hole? Foramin's a word for hole. So if we got many holes, we've got foramina. These are cribriform foramina. These little holes are what your olfactory nerves come up through from your schnoz. That's why your ethmoid bone is all up in your nose bone, because it's all about your nose, right? You got olfactory nerves coming up in your brain. When you smell stuff, your brain's like, hey, I recognize what that is. You know, it's Granny's apple pie. Hooray.